Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Gist Me the Bible Stories brought to you by Universal As always, I'm your storyteller, Yossi, and today I'm going to be talking about Moses. Yes, Moses, the power guy. Yes, I'm going to be talking about him today. Now, in the last episode, we talked about Joseph and how he was able to bring his entire household to Egypt to live there in the beautiful land of Goshen. And if you have not watched that episode, please check that out before watching this. Now, as I said, Joseph and his brothers lived in the beautiful land of Goshen, and they began to multiply and increase. And many years down the line, when Joseph and his brothers had died, their descendants continued to live in Egypt, multiplying and increasing. And there was a new pharaoh in Egypt. Now, this pharaoh did not know about the very good deeds of Joseph. Now, he was very paranoid because he saw that these Israelites, these Hebrew men, were multiplying and multiplying, and he felt that, if their neighboring, countries decided to war against them, these Israelites might partner with them to overpower them. And so because of that paranoia, he decided to, do some nasty things to these Israelites. Now, his first plot was to instruct the midwives that whenever they went to deliver any of the Hebrew women of their children, if it was a baby girl, they should allow the baby to live. But if it was a baby boy, they should kill the baby. Now, these midwives had the fear of God and did not obey the instruction of Pharaoh. Now, Pharaoh came to meet them and was like, I'm seeing that these Hebrew boys are living. Are you not doing what I told you to do? And so they lied and said, these Hebrew women are really strong, and before we get to their house to help them deliver their baby, they will have already pushed the baby out. The baby would have already been delivered before they got there, and so they will not be able to carry out the work. So they are really stronger than the Egyptian women when it comes to labor. And so Pharaoh decided to take the matter into his hands and made a command that said every son born to the Hebrews should be killed, but every daughter born to the Hebrews should be left to live. Now, this was a very wicked command. Now, there was a man from the house of Levi, one of the tribes in Israel, and he married a woman also from the house of Levi. Now, these two had a son, and of course they're Hebrews, so the next command was to have this boy killed. But because the mother did not want to lose her son, she saw that her son was beautiful, was healthy, and of course she didn't want him to die, so she decided to hide him for a while. Now, she was able to hide him for about 3 months, but soon realized that she could not hide him any longer. So she put him in a basket and put him at the Nile River. Now, she told her daughter to watch the baby to see what will happen to him. Now, Pharaoh's daughter usually had a bath at the Nile, so she came there that day to have a bath, and she came with her maidens. Now, they decided to walk on the bank of the river Nile, and as they were walking, she saw the basket, so she beckoned on her maidens to fetch the basket for her. And when they brought the basket, she opened it and saw the baby, and the baby was crying. So she had pity on this baby because she immediately knew that this baby was obviously one of the sons born to the Hebrew women. And so she decided to keep the baby for herself, to raise the baby. Now, Pharaoh's daughter had named the baby Moses, meaning drawn from the waters. Now, the baby's sister had been watching all along, and so she rushed off to Pharaoh's daughter to say, I can bring one of the nursing mothers of the Hebrew household to help you wean this baby. I mean, the baby would need breast milk, right? And so Pharaoh's daughter accepted, and so the sister ran off to call her mother. So her mother came to meet Pharaoh's daughter, and Pharaoh's daughter gave her the assignment to wean her baby until the baby was old enough. Now, Pharaoh's daughter did not know that the baby actually was going back to the hands of his biological mother. But the instruction was that after she had finished weaning him, the baby would be brought back to her and the baby would become hers. That's Pharaoh's daughter's. So, of course, the mother took it. I mean, it was better than the baby dying anyway. So she took the baby and weaned him. And when it was time, she returned him to Pharaoh's daughter. Now, many years down the line, I guess Moses knew his origin because he saw one of the Egyptian men, maltreating the Hebrew men. And because he was really filled with compassion, he fought the Egyptian and killed him. Now, the next day, he saw 2 Hebrew men fighting and decided to, separate them. Now, one of them lashed out against him to say, do you want to kill us like you killed the Egyptian? And so Moses immediately knew that the matter was already known to the public, and Pharaoh got to know about it and wanted to kill Moses. So Moses ran away from Egypt and ran towards the land of the Midianites. And when Moses ran off towards the land of the Midianites, he saw a well and he, sat down by the well. Now, there was this priest of Midian who had 7 daughters, and his daughters went to the well to fetch some water. But when they got there, the shepherds there did not want them to fetch water and chased them away. But Moses was able to help them to fetch water, and these women went home and told their father. And so the father told them to, call Moses to come and feast with them as a way of saying thank you for his help. Now when Moses got to meet this man, he decided to stay on to work for this man. I mean, he had nowhere else to go, and so the man welcomed him and also gave him one of his daughters to marry. And so Moses married one of his daughters and kept on living with them. Now many years down the line, about 40 years, Moses was still tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, and he started to lead the flock towards Horeb, that's Sinai, the mountain of God. Now when he got there, an angel of the Lord appeared in a blazing flame of fire in the midst of the bushes. Now Moses looked and saw that the bush was with fire, but it wasn't burning. So he decided to take a closer look. Now Moses must have been really bold, because if it was someone like me, I would have run away, because I mean, a bush is with fire and it's not burning. That's the magic. I want to run the other side. But Moses decided to take a closer look. Now as he walked closer, God then called out to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses. And Moses answered, here I am. That means Moses was able to hear God's voice and of course recognize that it had to be God. God then introduced himself and said, I am the God of your father Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the ground that you're standing on is a holy ground, and you should remove his sandals. Now Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look upon the face of God. Now this shows a great deal about the knowledge of the people around that time, to know that there was a God. I mean, he wasn't scared, like, who is talking to me, what's going on, where am I, why am I hearing voices? He was able to know that this had to be God. And I'm sure it must have been from the story of what has gone on from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The story of how God had been with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob must have been passed down many generations, because as we see down the line in the Bible, we realize that they kept on preserving the story down the line, so that they were able to recall all of their father's relationship with God and how God has been with them over the years. So Moses was able to recognize that immediately, and so that reverence immediately came in, because he did not want to look at the face of God. Now God then told Moses that he had seen the suffering of his people in Egypt and he had come to rescue them, and that he was sending Moses over to Pharaoh to do all of that, and that Moses had to go back to Egypt to meet with Pharaoh, that he was first to meet with the elders of the Israelites and tell them about what God said. And Moses then said, how would I be able to convince them? How would I tell them about this? Who would I introduce you as? And then God introduced himself and said his name is I am that I am, and that he should tell them that I am sent him. Now this message made it quite clear that these Israelites had a knowledge of God. And I remember that somebody asked me some time ago about what will happen to those who were born before Jesus Christ came and died and brought us salvation. And I said that the people in the Old Testament knew about God, and there's a scripture to back that up, that they knew about God. I mean, nobody needed to tell Noah about God. They all knew about God and were able to pass that on across generations. So that's why God was able to tell Moses that if you tell them that I am sent you, they'll be able to recognize that it was God, because they knew that God was real. They knew that there was a God. All right, so that was enough for Moses. So God then instructed Moses that he would need to go with the elders of Israel to meet Pharaoh and tell him that they needed to take some days to go into the wilderness to sacrifice to God. But God then said that he knows the heart of Pharaoh, and that Pharaoh will not oblige them their requests. And that was when he was going to show his power, that he would have to show his wonders, his might, and strike the Egyptians. And it was only after that that Pharaoh would allow them to go. And then he made sure to tell Moses that by the time he was done with the Egyptians, after finished dealing with them, that he was going to make sure that they respected and favored the Israelites, and that they will not just leave empty-handed, that these women, the Israelite women, will go to meet their masters and demand for articles of silver, of gold, of clothing, and they will plunder the houses of the Egyptians and go with a lot of the riches which they actually deserve, because they were really dealt with in Egypt. So they will plunder the riches of the Egyptians and live very rich. When they will be leaving Egypt, they will be going with a lot of wealth. That was what God told him as a sign to show that he was the one behind all of this. So Moses was still unsettled, and so he told God, what if they don't take me seriously? What if they don't believe me? And then God told Moses, what is in your hand? Moses said it was a rod. And then he said, toss the rod on the ground. And then Moses tossed the rod on the ground, and the rod turned to a serpent. And Moses was afraid, and he moved backwards. I was like, what's going on? And then God then said, okay, stretch out your hand and pick this serpent by the tail. I would have said, what? I should pick snake from the tail. That's what happened. But Moses stretched forth his hand and picked the snake by the tail, and it turned back to a rod. That was some awesome wonders, right? Yeah. Then God then said that he should do this as a sign, so that the elders of the Israelites will believe that he indeed sent him. Now he also told him to put his hand into his robe. Now Moses put his hand into his robe, and when he brought it out, his hand was leprous. Then God then told him to put his hand back into his robe. He put his hand back into his robe, and when he brought it out, the hand was made whole again. That's some gangan stuff, right? That's awesome. Now God then told Moses that if they don't believe the first sign, they may believe the second sign. But if they still do not believe the signs, that he should take them to the Nile River and then fetch some water out of the Nile River and, pour it on the ground, and that the water on the ground would turn to blood. After this, Moses was now like, well, God, I don't really speak well. I'm not fluent. I stutter. I'm not the best person for the job, yada, yada, yada. So God was now like, Moses, who makes those that are mute or deaf or those that can see and the blind? Is it not I, God? Is it not me? So, what is it to you? Then it was not like he has put the words in his mouth and he'll be able to speak. But Moses was still like, you know what, God, please let the message come through another person's mouth. And so God was now really pissed with Moses at that point. I was like, okay, is that not your brother Aaron coming along? Like when he meets you, he's going to be overjoyed. And so God was now like, this your brother Aaron will be like your mouthpiece, and you'll be like a God to him. You will tell him the things that I tell you, and then he would say them as I have instructed. And so that was how it was. God would deliver a message to Moses, and Moses would deliver it to Aaron, and Aaron would then, broadcast it to everyone that needed to hear about it. God even told Moses that his brother will be overjoyed when he sees him. So anyway, Moses decided to, tell Jethro that he needed to go back to Egypt to see his people, to see if they were still alive. And then God told Moses that those who were seeking his death are already dead, and so he can return back to Egypt. And so, Moses told his father-in-law that he needed to return, and of course his father-in-law bade him farewell and told him to go in peace. So Moses took his wife and his sons and rode off towards Egypt. Now as Moses was going towards Egypt, God had already gone ahead of him to meet Aaron and instructed Aaron to go towards the wilderness and that he will meet with Moses. So as Moses was journeying towards Egypt, he met with Aaron, and then he was able to tell Aaron all of the messages that God had instructed him to deliver, and Aaron was supposed to be his mouthpiece, and so they were able to share that information. And Aaron also delivered the message that God had given him as well. And there was something that happened even before they met. Now God was going to strike Moses because Moses had not yet circumcised his son, but Zipporah, his wife, immediately knew like this was what was going to happen. So she quickly took the knife and circumcised their son, and then that was how they were able to escape, death. So it's important for us to know the instruction of God and to abide by it, because yes, you might be on an assignment that he will send you, but if you don't follow his instructions, you can be pulled out of the game if you don't follow him. So you have to make sure that you are in tune with what he says, and you are in accordance with his will and doing what he instructs at every step of the stage. You can't say because you are assigned by God then you don't obey some things. You have to obey all the things that he has instructed you, so that you can fit into what he wants you to do perfectly, and you can work in alignment with him. So that is why we need to be very sensitive in the spirit to know what is happening. Some things can happen and you're wondering, okay, why is this child sick? What's going on with this child? Not knowing that there's something that has been broken, there's something that is wrong somewhere, and if you are sensitive in the spirit, you know exactly what the problem is and you can fix it immediately. So anyway, it was after that Aaron and Moses had met and shared the information, and so they headed together to Egypt to deliver the message of the Lord. Now that's where we're going to stop today, and in the next episode we're going to talk about what happened when they got to Egypt and all the wonders that God displayed in Egypt to show his mighty power and rescue the Israelites out of Egypt. So I'll see you in the next video. I hope this has been quite insightful for you, and this Gist Me the Bible stories is to help believers, especially those who are adults and did not get to enjoy Sunday school, to hear all of these Bible stories, to get to experience the stories of the Bible in a very nice and gisting form, so that they can get acclimatized to the Bible stories, so that by the time we start reading it in scripture, it can make a lot of sense, and I can chip in some points here and there to help tie everything together. So I hope this has been of a blessing to you. Please ensure that you subscribe to this channel, click the notification bell to get notified when we release a new video, and of course like this video and share with your friends and family so that they can join the Universal Scroll family. We love you all, and I'd like to see you in the next video. Until then, we can hang out on our social media pages on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Love you all. Bye.